Kazushi. So we got to say something about Kazushi now. Kazushi's off balance. That's Japanese. So tell me what you think. What came up with? And you're excluded because you didn't get the assignment. But if you think up something on the way around the circle, we'll start this way. So you're on the spot.
Okay. On the physical side is when the shoulders are no longer aligned with the hips.
So yeah, you're cool, and then you're not cool. You're cool, and then you're not cool. You're cool, and then you're not cool. Right. Shoulders and hips.
I think that it's something that individuals have a hard time seeing and noticing. I guess for it's hard for them to picture or be able to present the outcome.
I think you're right. It's something you have to condition yourself to notice and tune into, because we have this illusion about how stable we are. We go through this phase when we're little tiny kids, when we're learning to walk, and we know we're unstable when they run, right? We have that activity of the center falling and getting your feet underneath it, and we're really, really crazy. And then we grow up, and then all that gets kind of cool, and we think we're walking like stable people. And this doesn't feel like anything. It's like it goes to sleep, that sense of thing. And looking at it in others goes to sleep too. Because we presume walking as a stable activity, where walking is still a state of out of control falling activity that we're just compensating for more competently. So I think you're dead on. And we kind of exist in an illusion of, oh, we're pretty stable. I'm balanced. Sort of. If you took a human being and you turned him into a statue, and you just stood him in a city park somewhere, they'd fall over. Just 2 feet standing on the ground. The wind, a bird's landing on it. Almost any force at all, because we have no stable base really. We got 2 points of contact on the ground. That's why they make the big square pedestal that the feet are attached to on statues, right? Because if it were just this, that's crazy. You can't make a statue that'll last very long standing up like that. A tripod, or you can attach it to a big square or rectangle. It's stable again. And it's, we forget it because we feel I'm cool, I'm stable, I'm fine. But not really.
Getting the other guy to take an unintentional step.
Taking an unintentional steps would be good. Can you say more about that?
Just be able to move when they weren't ready. Kind of like what you were talking about with Carl knew before you knew.
There
When he
was
was ready. It seems like the guys
step about to happen. They didn't even plan to take it, but they're taking it, and they don't know why they're taking it, but they got to take it, and then, yeah.
I'm on the receiving end of those more.
There's a neat demonstration of that. So you're just going to stand there and be bad, and we're just in connection. We have some sense of connection, and we're cool like this, but you don't want to move because you know anytime you move, I'm going to get you. And I don't want to move you. I just go like this. And eventually, he'll have to equalize. Boom! I didn't try to pull him at all. I just changed the shape in a place that had to happen. Or some version of it. He could go other places possibly. He's cool, he's stable, he's whatever, and I changed here. And I don't pull him. But 1, and then normally 2 will happen. And it becomes a predictable effect. The step has to happen, or he has to just crumple right where he stands, one of the 2. But it's provoking it without any kind of duress of pushing and pulling, forcing. And then suddenly the step has to come out of nowhere. And if you happen to have done it a few times, you know, let's all tag that step. Push the ground. I'll be there ready. It's like the psychic hotline called me up and said, he's about to take a step with his left foot. He's about to take a step with his left foot. It's probably going to land in this box right here. So let's go over to that box and put some tape on the ground. Take the target, get our scope out, line up our shot, and wait for that foot to land there. And as it does, boom, easy picking. In judo, that would be like where your foot sweep would happen. In Aikido, it would be like where we add a little body drop on it. So his foot lands and his body gets there, but now it's not just his body landing there, it's his body plus a little something that he wasn't planning on. And suddenly it's like he went from a state of taking a step that he's used to taking. But imagine you're taking a step you're used to taking and the teleporter from Star Trek happens, and the teleporter from Star Trek beams a suitcase into your hand. And suddenly, that suitcase, it weighs maybe, I don't know, anywhere from 10 pounds to 50 pounds. That's usually plenty. And you're just a normal thing taking a step, and then suddenly there's an extra 50-pound weight hanging like, woo! You go up and off to the races. You may or may not fall at that moment, but you definitely have to do extra activity that was unintended to wind up getting back to cool. And again, while they're doing extra activity to get back to cool, it's like a free move. We're playing checkers. I get a free move. You get a free move a lot in checkers, you win a bunch. You get a free move in chess a lot, you win a bunch. If you can get free moves, that's a good thing. Cool. Very good. What you think, man?
I wasn't here last night, but what I've noticed
Oh,
was in many of my learning the techniques and releases, I typically stand almost unbalanced. We were always taught, right, same hand, same foot, but I notice a lot of times I'll do this.
Right.
So I'm putting myself off balance. Some of the moves, I'm trying to compensate real quick, and then it screws everything up. So that's one thing I've learned.
Well, our default counterbalancing mechanism, boom, is that. This swing of this arm against the swing of that leg, counterbalance into the same posture. That's why, people walking up the street, this thing. And they call that heterolateral movement that exercise physiologists say. And it is inherently stable at speed and with momentum. And it becomes our normal, like when we're little kids. The little kids starting out, little scamper thing. That's what they arrive at as the counterbalance, so they're not always doing that crazy scamper. The thing about it is that we practice the same hand and foot movement, and we're moving around like a bear, this thing. And that actually is really, really hard. That actually goes back to something that's kind of like walking on a tightrope. It's a little tougher. But if you start moving like that and you're in contact with them, their body starts moving like that too. And if you take people that have been conditioned to survive under same hand and foot conditions and work in this sort of thing, and you apply it to somebody that's never done that training, wow. Because you think about, again, like guys fumbling on a football field or stumbling, you see a whole lot of being cool in a state like this, but you see a whole lot of getting uncool in states like that. When the hand and foot get together under highly dynamic conditions, high probabilities it goes down. Things are falling toward the earth. We're doing it voluntarily and getting really, really comfortable with that dicey state, that walking on the tightrope state, until it just becomes, well, that's completely stable and cool. Look what I can do with that. Hey, that's fun to do the walk. But it's actually a very counterintuitive way to be able to move it all. And when you link up with another human being and start moving that way, it puts crazy impositions on the people. Because their natural thing is suddenly taken away from them. Because they're having to operate in conjunction to your center. That's resonance. You hook up with another body and you start moving around, and either the bodies together are completely biologically stupid and stuff starts falling, or it gets resonant and cool and everything starts getting into waves together. Right? Suddenly it turns into dancing. Everything's getting smooth. We do that dancing thing a lot. And then we do it with each other, and we're all walking cool same hand and foot. We're all walking cool opposite hand and foot. You grab untrained people, they're pretty cool here, sort of. But boy, howdy, once they get there, it gets much, much better. So it's very interesting. I like that you brought that up. How about you, man? Affecting changes in someone else's life. Say more.
Like the step they didn't intend to take, you change their second's relationship with them in a way that they didn't intend to.
Yeah. That's a big subject, and you're right. you are provoking or inviting change, but I would put a caveat on it, because for a long time, how I would perceive it is, I'm doing this thing to him and making it happen. And so my conscious mind would engage and say, okay, he's about to step on his left foot, I'm going to step over there and put my weight over there too, and lean on it and make that change for him. And as long as that was going on, I was actually making more interference for myself as I did it. It is true that we provoke a change in them that they didn't plan to make, and we are affecting their center with our center, but you do it without, well, it's hard to describe. It's sort of like we make connection. Yes, Joe? We make a connection with old Joe, and I can feel his structure through this point of connection. But I'm not affecting him. I'm not trying to push or pull or add pressure or diminish pressure or change anything particularly at that point of connection. But then I change something in me. And when I change something in me, even though that point doesn't change, I look over at Joe, and what are you feeling? Yeah. That's happening in him in response to this, but I'm not trying to consciously do that to him through this point. It's like this point remains nothing. I shift on my weight to this foot, and his body does that, but I didn't push it over there, which is trippy. You kind of got to let it happen instead of make it happen. You get conscious of changing you, and then observing the change in them as sort of its own process. And it is doing it to him in one way, but in another way, if I try to do it to him, I can't do it. If I try to do the same process, if I go, hey, we have this sense of connection, and then I do that too, I send so much signal through this thing that his nervous system reacts immediately and just kills him. Right? So if I actually try to shift his weight over that foot, I shift my weight to my foot, it's like nothing to you. Well, you be cool. Don't let me do it. Yeah. That, my arms relaxed. There's no attempting to transmit anything to him or try to force it to happen. I got to let it happen as I make the change in me.
Can you turn this way? The camera.
Sure. If I try to force Joe onto this foot, Joe's body will say, screw that. He's not interested in that.
All right.
Throw me down, you fool. Right? I mean, and that's cool. That's a good uke. But if I let this point of connection remain the same, and I just change me, I shifted me, and he gets to go along for the ride because you can't not. That's Masubi. Good.
Right.
Yeah, and now once he's there, I just conveniently let him stay. Sort it out. But it's exactly what you're saying, but it's a specialized way, I guess it's, yeah, maybe. And it took me a long time to pursue it. For a long time, maybe upwards of 10, 15 years, I was still consciously trying to drive into particular actions or effects and provoke them with intentionality.
Is it just adding an unexpected problem?
To some degree, it's a threshold of vulnerability that occurs in any state change. So we have a state change that's a step, or we have a state change of changing posture, or we have a state change of going from separate centers of gravity to connected centers of gravity. We have lots of different state changes that occur, and every time that occurs, the nervous system is having to account for that change. And so it's like it's having to do a bunch of extra calculation. In the background of the back part of your brain, it's having to go through, do some damn geometry and calculus and stuff, and sort out how to get everything cool again, so that I can have this illusion of stability. Right? This illusion of, yeah, I'm a stable thing on planet Earth. And every time those states change, wow, if you're there to add or subtract something that's necessary or add something that's unnecessary, then wow, they can wind up in bigger and bigger problems that kind of cascade. So yeah, good. How about you, Richard?
For understanding the mode by which we move and how other people are put off balance by our actions or our emotions, for me, it helps to know the biomechanics and the kinesiology and the psychology
Right.
of what's going on. Knowing that, you need to push somebody's elbow up in a certain way so that their shoulder responds in a certain way.
Right.
Knowing that men have their weight distribution and their balance more in their shoulders, whereas women are going to find it more down here. So you gotta
We all
have
need to get down there with you guys.
Yeah, well, that's where it
Yeah, we
sits.
tend to be up here, you're right.
But if you
Dead on.
are rotating somebody or you're trying to get them to move, knowing that certain people have other things that go on with their body and how they
Special
move
topics,
things,
yeah,
special
because,
things.
oh, he's a real bendy guy, and oh, he's the stiff board guy, and
Right.
oh, this is a person with a great mass, and this is a person with a small mass, and oh, the leg length. Some people's legs are shorter and longer, and amen, girl.
All that stuff kind of, we don't want to get to the point where we don't have to think about it consciously, but we understand the mechanics of what is actually
We
going on.
want to study it acutely until we can forget it. Study it so acutely it becomes unconscious to you. Study it so that it becomes completely internalized and automatic, and you don't have to have conscious focal on it at all, but it's all processing. Exactly. And that's beautifully put. That's wonderful. It's one of the reasons you want to work with a big variety of people. There's a tendency of people, oh, I like working with him, but I can't stand working with him. So I'm going to work with him every class. We're just going to do it, and we become buddies, and we always work together, and we do all our katas together, we do all our rondoi, and we just have the grand old time. And man, this other guy, pain in the ass. I never have fun. It always hurts. He's always cranky. Man, my wrist, it's terrible, and he doesn't fall good, and I don't ever look cool. But we're cool, so we do. And we fall into these habitual patterns of who we like to work with. You want to work with the variety. Even the stuff that you don't like. If it ain't hurting you to injure you. If you're getting injured, say, I don't have to work with you. There's a reasonable boundary you should have for yourself of who you're going to put up with and who you're not. But as much as you can to get out of your zone of just complete comfort with the physiologies and the bodies and the personalities, and to spread out to a wider swath and work with everybody as much as you can expand. So that if a giant walks in the door, a guy built like Sasquatch, you want to get a piece of that. You want to feel what that's like. You want to find out how that affects everything. And if you get a dwarf, you get somebody who's this tall. You want to work with that too. And you want to work with the greatest human variety and the people that are bendy and made out of rubber bands. And you try to do the joint lock and it just keeps going. You go, ooh, this is weird. And you want the people that are, they're Mr. Roboto kind of. You want all those nervous systems and all those personalities and all those changes in shape and size, and the very big people and the really, really skinny people, and all the shapes and sizes. And you want to let your subconscious chew up as much data over the great width and breadth of humanity as you can. I don't suggest trying it with gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, other primates, because they'll kick your ass. They don't do right. They got a whole other thing going, and we're in a they blow us away. So probably stay to human beings as much as you can. You might get away with it with cats and dogs a little bit. I don't know. People do sometimes. You can expand out into some of that maybe. But people who talk about messing around with one of our cousins from the jungles, the chimpanzees, the orangutans, the apes, probably isn't going to work. But for human beings, it works good. They don't have that walking around on 2 feet thing. If we could train the chimps to do this all the time and get out of that cool tripod thing that they're doing as they move, we'd probably be able to kick their ass too.
Well, they're just kind of built different too.
Yeah, I don't know
Their
which
structure.
thing. We just have to mutate them, I guess. Planet of the Apes, here we go.
Isn't that us? That's us though, right?
So, large variety. Variety is really important so that you get as much data into your subconscious to work from as possible to inform the balance structure and timing functions particularly. because the variability in size and shape and structure and to some degree the tension in the bodies is going to affect timing and everything. And also the effect of if Joe is doing kotegaeshi to me and I'm super loosey guy and he just does that, if I'm the stiff rigid guy and he does that, he gets this effect. And it can be really common for him to think, oh, it's not working. But it actually has. It's put me on my heel and my knee has straightened. But it's different than the effect if I'm loosey-goosey and I'm on the ball of my foot and it goes like that. Or he might do it and he gets this, which is a whole nother framework. And it still has worked. It's just worked differently in each case. And you kind of have to get past the expected result and go with the actual result and notice it and not get stuck with the expectation of, oh, it's supposed to look like this picture. Because it'll look like all kinds of different pictures at the end of the thing. You just have to recognize them and know how they're exploited. Very good. Thank you. Your turn.
Since I thought about this in terms of physical contact and mentally as well, and the best definition I could come up with was getting someone off balance means disturbing one's place in one's universe. So standing here physically, this would be my universe. Someone as simple as touching me would be physically them affecting my balance in even a very microscopic form. But mentally also, I believe that time is eternal and people live from one moment to another. So in that moment, if somebody is affecting me physically, they inadvertently affect me mentally as well. So disturbing my place in my physical and mental universe is getting someone off balance.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah. I like that it includes the mental and the physical. And the mental part, I would go towards perception. The perceptual frame gets disturbed as well as the mental or the physical. But that's wonderful. I think that's terrific. And the fact that you're in this contained thing and anything that makes contact with you mentally, physically, perceptually can all have effect. Yeah. That's really cool. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
I think it's effect on this
Center of gravity.
center of gravity change.
So that's very classical, and that's quite good. Center of gravity is like the center of the picture. That's the big prime mover. Boom, boom. This bowling ball, in my case, this very large bowling ball that's falling through space, and my body is coming back behind it. If I'm going to turn, the bowling ball turns, and everything turns. If I'm going to step back, the bowling ball falls back, and my feet get out from under it and try to land in a stable place. If I got to do a sidestep, the bowling ball falls over here, and everything gets under it. When that center of gravity gets affected, you are affecting the center part of their being, and you're doing it in a very direct and powerful way. And I think that's huge, a huge part of it. So that's a great way to look at it. Cool. All right, Robert.
Aiming for Kazushi, even if the technique you want to perform doesn't quite come off, beats obsessing over the technique. If you go for that,
Right.
while they're not off balance, I've had it where I've been thrown around the room while I'm obsessing over trying to get.
Obsessing after the thing.
Yeah,
Right.
And also, after what you mentioned yesterday, it's another thing I'm bad at, especially because I'm big, I tend to, you will not move me.
Yeah.
So
Calm.
I've been in my starting BJJ, I can stand up for 5 minutes and nothing much happens.
Right. They just jump around you, and you look at them like, what are you doing to me, fool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, so you got to give guru kami so that you experience it, the partner gets good training, not just, I'm not going to fall.
Right. It's
Because
a
from my side, that's
it up
often
and down
very
in
easy.
leukemia. Yeah, right. Okay.
Until I meet someone like you and then I fall over and wonder what the hell.
And the reason that is the big variety I've dealt with. But yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I really like that you brought out just chase the off balance, don't chase the technique. Is that what I hear you say?
Yeah, I've been stung by that before. It's like,
Yeah.
you will cover.
I'm trying to do this thing, guy, and that thing is that's got to happen. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And, well, just make it happen. My teacher would say, the more your kazushi, this is Chuck Caldwell, the more your kazushi's right on the front end, the more the back end or the throw part will take care of itself. So put your concentration, your timing, your effort, and your attention primarily on the front end of the activity that started. So the first step of the release, or the first movement of balance break in the 17 or the 23, the first activity that takes them into a state of disequilibrium, that is where you kind of put your time and attention and precision. And the better that is, and the more sharp that is, and the more precise and carefully done and well-constructed, clean that is, the less effort on the tail end. So if the front end is really right, the tail end can just be light touches, just a finger. Over time, the front end can be just a finger too, just a very light touch and almost nothing, and still be very precise and get the job done. But if you have to concentrate anywhere in the process and put your attention and mind on what you're really after, it's almost like you forget to do the technique and you just do a series of balance breaks. You just say, hey, I'm going to do Koregaish. We'll do it on the squishy floor over here. And I'm going, I want to do a balance break to the guy. So he does something, I get in here, boom, I do the balance break. And as he moves again, I want to do the balance break. I'm not interested too much in grabbing his wrist and twisting on it and doing anything else. I've actually caught him by my pinky. I'll do it with the pinky. But the second balance break's what's kicking his ass here. In the Koregaish, we get addicted to something that looks like, I do the balance break, and then I change my hands and I turn and grab, and then I go over here and twist this. And we think that ending is Koregaish. We identify Koregaish as this gripping activity that twists the wrist in this particular way and reverses it and define it in our heads that way. It's a balance break that goes like this, boom, or a recovery, and a balance break that goes like this. And the gripping is extra added attraction. The gripping and the twisting and all that other stuff is like window dressing. It's window dressing. And if we confuse the window dressing, the techniques for the principle of the doing the balance break thing, we miss out on a big part of the picture. So, amen. That's a great point. Thank you. Wow. So, have you come up with anything? We're talking about balance breaks. What do you think?
Well, initially, when I was introducing the concept of balance in general, it was initially about what are you going to do to the guy out there?
Yeah, how are you going to get him?
But one has to learn about their own body and how do you have your body in balance?
Right.
And in a conflict, you could lose that balance, even though you may have the advantage at first.
Right.
But if you lose the balance, then the attacker gets the advantage. So it's also maintaining balance.
Right.
And the second thing is to recognize when you have an opening from the attacker.
Right.
So
you got to be able to see it when it happens. Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to necessarily get him off balance per se. You just have to recognize the opening and take advantage of that.
Naturally occurs.
But that takes a lot of practice and time. And at the same time, maintaining your own balance.
Right. You want to be as cool as you can be in the process.
Right. Because there's a lot of things that go on
Right.
mentally in your head when you don't know what's going to happen as time goes on for that attack.
Yeah.
It can become more aggressive.
Right.
And a lot of things can change.
Everything gets scarier,
Right.
faster, louder, noisier, terrible, messy. Turns into a mess.
Right.
Yeah. Very well put. Very well put. It's I like particularly that you emphasize keeping yourself cool at the same time. If we're a hooked up physical system, come here, David. And we have connection with each other. Our centers of gravity are now separate centers of gravity, and our centers of gravity are one big center of gravity, even if we're just touching very, very, very lightly. It's very odd that way. It doesn't take a huge amount of connection. You don't have to be like this to be one center of gravity. We're actually out here fairly tenuously in contact, not a lot of pressure. But if I shift my weight onto 1 foot, he shifts his weight onto 1 foot. Even through this really light connection. It's very strange. Very strange. I'm going to have you guys do this here a little bit. See what it feels like to you. Now we're both standing on 1 foot. And if I were not compensating, we would both be like the dancing bear. We're both going, hey, let's just stand over here on this foot. The difference is, as I go there, I bend my knee more. He didn't bend his knee more. He bent his posture more. He changed at the hip, and the foot came off the ground to try to counterbalance in a default setting of counterbalance. And rather than me put my leg in the air too, right? Oh, now he's I didn't put my leg in the air. I bent my knee and kept my posture upright, which is where we're going to right there. So when we create these effects, we are often in a precarious state as well. We're often in a state that mirrors the state they're in, and we're having to compensate internally as we create this mirror effect so that I might be on the same foot he's on, and we're both basically standing like the bear that's on one foot, but I'm standing on the bear that's on one foot with a bent knee and my posture trying to stay cool at the same time. And because it hits him as a thing that he's having to come and compensate for after the fact, he doesn't necessarily know which foot it's going to be. He's not ready necessarily. His default settings kick in, and you get these posture effects. Cool. So I like that. Hey man, doing something. And then we're staying in the relationship and waiting for them to drop the hammer on themselves. And as they do, you get a big opportunity. You get a big window of opportunity to do all sorts of things. Back to the threshold of vulnerability, the state change provoking this big vulnerability in their nervous system that you can then explain. Is that gum? Yeah. Okay. My teacher would scold you now. You're chewing gum on the mat. And I don't care if you chew on gum on the mat, but you'll take a fall and the gum will lodge in your esophagus and you'll choke and we'll think you're having a heart attack and we'll give you CPR and we'll breathe into your mouth and we'll force the gum deeper into your esophagus and you'll choke to death and we'll all say, oh, we're sorry, but you'll be dead.
Swallow the gum now.
I don't know why he would rant like that, but that was one of his rants, and it just comes up in my mind. I go, wow, he's chewing gum. And when that happened, this is what I would hear, because my teacher would flip out. Oh, you're chewing gum, and this is what's going to happen. And he was kind of a paranoid guy. He was. That's who he was. But he'd been around this stuff a long time, so I just trans-channeled my old teacher and gave you the gum. Apologies, Carl, wherever you are. Okay. Your turn.
I remember reading, it was a fiction book. Many years ago. And in the book it explained that to interrupt an activity, you don't need to knock a person down. You just need to affect them in some fashion.
Oh, I like that.
And this kind of gets in with the idea of a light touch and also a small touch.
Yeah.
Whereby if you're trying to interrupt someone in taking a basketball shot, you don't need to knock them down. You just need to affect them in some fashion.
Disturb the process. Yeah.
And as we've seen, the demonstrations that you've given and others have given, it doesn't require knocking the person down. It just requires some input that causes them to have an unintended result on their part.
Beautiful. Well put. I like that. Yeah. Right in line with my thank you. Bravo. Chris?
Oh, you stole everything I had.
We've stolen everything. No, you don't have anything else to say? Okay. Well, this is a wonderful discussion. You've given me lots of data points about where you're coming from. And it's, I'm with a bunch of you guys in terms of Kazushi, in the purest definition I have come to from my research, it's you make them do anything that they weren't planning to do. If they shift their weight, if they touch their nose, if, hey, your thing's unzipped, if they have to take a step, if they have to bend over in a way that they weren't planning to, if they have to compensate in any way, shape, or form, you've actually accomplished Kazushi. And that's a very, very broad thing, and it deals with the perceptual, the psychological, the physical. It deals with the entire process. And it's much broader than most people's concept of it. It's the concept that Carl Geist came to eventually. So now you'll say, well, what is Kazushi? He said it's making them make any move that they didn't plan to make. Anything that they didn't, wasn't in their game plan when it all gets going that they had to do, any compensating that they had to make is a duress that you're placing on them. So it's broader than just the center of gravity. It's damn near anything. But the center of gravity is a huge part. It's the center part. It's still the main issue that we're dealing with. So to fool with this, let's do this exercise I did with Damon. And just, we'll do pinkies. This is a little pinky thing, right? So like the little kids do with their pinkies, we don't have a whole lot of contact here. We just have barely what you can do on the pinky, so no extra pressure than that. And now he does something in terms of a weight shift, and he doesn't pull or push this, but he just looks at the effect in me. Good. And he doesn't have to tell me what he's going to do. He just does what he's going to do. Good. Now I'll do something to him. And if it's right, he won't feel anything change here. This is me twisting like I'm doing a turning step, but I didn't turn. Okay? So keep this like equal sign. Right now we have, I don't know what we call 2. It's a 2, right?
Sure.
It's a 2.
It's a 2.
As you make the change, keep that 2. Yeah. Good. So the objective at the point of contact, very light tenuous contact, whatever that is, keep the pressure the same. Try not to manipulate or change at the point of contact. Make a change in your structure. You can make a change like shifting your weight. It's kind of big. You can make the change by turning your center inside your frame. It's happening, it's only happening one thing. You can make the change up into your posture of your upper back and shoulders if you like. And that'll do things to him. But this doesn't want to change at all. You want this to feel like nothing happened. And you don't try to push or pull him at all. You just make the change in you and you look over there and see what it does to him. Cool? And don't be in a rush. I don't need to see the change. Say, it's like that all over. It's not, it won't be sudden. You got to give it time to feed through. We're working in a very delicate structure here. So as he's in this state, he makes the change. Go ahead. Yeah. And he just observes the effect in me. Cool? So it'll be a lot of stuff that you're used to doing. I mean, he did Kotegaeshi right there. But he did Kotegaeshi, and there was never a pressure change, and there was never a twist, and there was never a... Good. Yeah. Doing it different. Good. Or he could have me in Kotegaeshi. This is interesting. And then I make the change. And even though he's got my wrist in a terrible place, it's like, great. Hold on tight. Don't let me do it to you. That's right. That's another thing my teacher would do. He would encourage you to, now don't let me do this to you, which is sort of a way of inviting you into extra pressure and extra internal tension because it's easier to manipulate. Sort of a dirty trick. But if you can convince them, now stop me, don't let me do this, come on, be really mean, and then hunker down, then you actually get a clearer signal from them. If they're out there being very delicate, it's actually tough. It's actually tougher to get the signal effect. If I touch him and it's just almost nothing, and then he has to work at that threshold with very lightness as he does it to me. Go ahead. Yeah, that's tough. Does it feel it build up?
Tough, yeah.
Because now as it builds up, I get to get cheers. Ha 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 ha. He didn't stay equal. But he only broke the rule by ounces of difference in pressure. I mean, it was very minute. But that's tough. But if I'm here, and he says, now don't let me do it to you. And I say, okay, I want you to do it. Now it's easy. Okay. So, as a new kid, you might dial it up so it becomes a big, obvious, easy effect for him for a little while. And work towards the lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter paradigm. And after a while, it's just a touch, and there's a change. And if I violate the rule, which I'm doing right now consciously, then he gets to make the change. And then you can throw it back and forth as to who's getting who. Or maybe we don't know who's getting who. We both think we're getting God. And it'll start working into a spontaneous conclusion that is non-predictable for either of us. Cool? Cool. So try that little game. Very light connection. Shift of body weight, change in posture, change in torso, change in structure on a fairly small scale. Observe the effect. He's a big, bad, evil bastard. Well, let me do it to you. He's immunized. He knows not to react to that. That's good. And it just demonstrates the vulnerability of that statue thing. That we have the illusion that we're stable. And we're really screwed. I know, it's crazy. You all right?
A lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Staying neutral at that point gives you freedom to move around and do what you like. If I get consciously affixed to that point and trying to do something